Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to another MTG Arena Top Decks video series. Today I want to talk to you about another one of the very popular top decks right now, White Weenie. I got quite a bunch of testing in with the deck and some versions, and yeah, also thought about some of the ins and outs, and yeah, came to certain conclusions at the moment that I want to share with you guys. And yeah, talk about why I think this is probably the right direction to go with the deck for now. Okay, before we jump into the deck tech, as usual, please subscribe to the channel. Down below, if you haven't yet, turn on notification icon to not miss out on future content, and please consider whitelisting YouTube on your ad block to help support the free content. Alright, on to the deck tech. Okay. So there are basically a couple of options when approaching the deck. You can play it mono white, you can splash red like people used to do before Ravnica Allegiance, or Frenzy and maybe Aurelia in the sideboard, or even Heroic Reinforcement or stuff like that in the main. And you could splash blue either for Deputy in the main, or only some or no deputies in the sideboard and some counter magic. The thing is, the cost of splashing is not that small, since the M10 duels, Fortress and Retreat, have serious costs in a deck that has usually like 20 lands. And if you get these one-landers on the draw with one of them, or double Fortress or Retreat openers that are otherwise great, are greatly hurt by this, because the deck usually wants to go 1-drop into double 1-drop, and then it goes nothing into 1-drop basically, which is devastating. And while you might think that doesn't happen that often and all, it happens, and it can cost you games, and it's a real cost, and you have to ask yourself if the splash is really worth it. Initially I thought Deputy is pretty great for the deck, but first of all, adding more 3-drops to the deck makes the deck quite clunky. Second of all, it's kind of unreliable as a removal. So the little removal you run, you kind of need to be reliable, because it deals with the few cards that actually beat you, like Wildgrowth Walker or stuff like that. And Deputy doesn't really do that. Then you kind of sometimes want to play it on curve, and then the 8 sources are not super reliable for that. And the deck already has a lot of 3-drops. So in order to not get too clunky, and also Tribunal, for example, working with 2 land or even sometimes 1 land hands, and being more reliable is a big upside here. And also allowing you to advance your board and use the removal in a more meaningful way than Deputy advances your board and is removal at the same time. Makes Deputy not, in the end, that good in the main deck, which is why people like AJ Ellenbogen basically have cut it after initially playing 4, and by now he's on 0 in the main. And then you're only looking at like something like 4 or 5 counters in the board, most of the time 4 negate, and maybe 1 or 2 deputies. But yeah, I think if Deputy isn't good enough in the main, you want it even less in the sideboard, I think, because it is kind of clunky, and as a sideboard card, it is not reliable enough, it's not cheap enough, it's not effective enough most of the time. So you want more impactful, more dedicated sideboard cards than Deputy, I think, usually. And the counters, they are fine, but they mostly serve the purpose of stopping sweepers or stopping Nexus combo. And there are other ways to do that. First of all, the deck actually beats sweepers reasonably well a fair share of the time. Like, for example, I've beaten many gate decks through a Gates Ablaze, because they like Gates Ablazed 3 1-drops, and then I just beat them with the rest, because they didn't have another sweeper. And they maybe had like a Ram or whatever that I tribunaled. So the deck actually can bait sweepers fairly well and then win after, and also has things that live through it, like Vanguard, Bodyguard, protecting something, or Witness, or just generating extra bodies with like History the turn after right away, and stuff like that. So sweepers are not that big of a deal, and now we have Unbreakable Formation, which we didn't have before. So now we actually have like a 3-mana negate for sweepers that also happens to do stuff in other spots and even against control decks, deals a bunch of extra damage to finish them, either after the sweeper or if they don't have a sweeper, making it, while more expensive, a lot more flexible and less likely to sit dead in your hand than a negate. Plus, negate with 8 sources is not super reliable. You sometimes might draw the blue source after the opponent cast a sweeper, or sit there with a negate without a blue source, having a dead card in your hand that might win you the game if it was anything that impacted the game. So there's a real cost to that splash as well. And if you have a way to like beat the Nexus kind of game well enough without negate, then I don't think it is necessarily worth it to play negate. And yeah, the red splash, I don't have that much of an opinion on it because I didn't actually play with it yet. I just felt like the way the deck played that I didn't really want or miss it. Like, I just felt like the way the deck plays out, you either usually, most of the time, win just fine with what you have, or playing a bunch of dudes for free with Frenzy wouldn't do that much. Like, sure, it kind of is an option against control, but like I said, now that you have a way to beat their sweepers, you don't even need that too much anymore. I didn't feel like against control I desperately want something like Frenzy either. Also, it has the same issues as negate, and I feel like negate is probably better because it has more, it's a bit more flexible and can generate tempo, and also helps against Nexus while the red splash doesn't. So I'm not too impressed by the red splash. Although the light red splash works a bit better since Frenzy is a less situational card and a card that comes online later, so you have more time to find the red source. But yeah, I feel like the deck can handle sweepers and Nexus just fine without any splash, and I'll explain to you why when we're going over the list. So let's start at the beginning. First off, we have 18 1-drops. I think that's about the minimum you want. I've seen lists with less, 16, 17. Not a big fan of that, especially with 4 Loxodon and lots of Tribunals and stuff. The deck really wants to go 1-drop into double 1-drop. That's like your best draws. And also having enough 1-drops means you can Loxodon often enough on turn 3 with 2 mana, or on turn 3 maybe playing another 1-drop for free, giving you maximum value out of it. Also, enough 1-drops means more likely Ascend for your Aspirant and Sentry. It's also pretty important, and obviously more payoff for your Formation and Marshal and Loxodon. I even wouldn't mind more than 18, like I could see 19. I'll talk about that in a moment, where I feel like there could be a card potentially cut for a 19th 1-drop, which would just simply be another Hunted Witness, but it's close and I'm not 100% sure on that. So yeah, for Dauntless Bodyguard, not much explanation needed. It's a knight for History of Benalia's 3rd stage, and it also is actually good against sweepers. If you can play something else on turn 1 and play this on turn 2 on another 1-drop, means the opponent can already only sweep 2 out of your 3 creatures. Sometimes you can even delay it to a point where you can use it to protect a Benalish Marshal, which is even more powerful. Then we have for Skymarcher Aspirant, another 2-power 1-drop to apply pressure against control against other creature decks. This can eventually attack in the air for like 3 or 4, thanks to the buffing potential of the deck. So that is the other like good turn 1 play for pressure in matchups where that matters. Then we have Snubhorn Sentry, a card that might seem a bit odd and that I was a bit surprised to see when I started playing with the deck and working myself into the deck. But once you play the deck a bunch, the card's actually pretty good. First of all, the 3 toughness means against the mirror or mono red, this actually blocks pretty well early on, which is not bad. It also can still attack, so it can still attack to flip something like a Legion's Landing. It attacks really well and applies a lot of pressure once you get the Ascend. The deck also happens to get the Ascent pretty well because you have a lot of like multi-permanent cards, like Legion's Landing is 2 permanents, History is 3 permanents, and so on. And then you can also like play a lot of permanents quickly because they're also cheap and have Convoke and stuff. This is one of the cards that makes your red matchup a lot better and turned it from like being very bad to, I would argue, slightly favorable, because yeah, now you have a lot better game against Chain Whirler, giving you a lot more ways to curve out without losing your entire board to Chain Whirler. And if only 1 or 2 guys die instead of everything, that's all the difference and everything you need usually, because losing 1 or 2 random bodies to Chain Whirler is surprisingly manageable for the deck. So yeah, that's why Snubhorn Sentry, then Legion's Landing, not much explanation needed. It's a 4-off, it helps you hit your 3rd power quite a lot, or your 3-drops, because the deck has quite a lot of 3-drops for 20 lands. It also gives you something to do if you flood out a bit. It's another great way to fight sweepers, especially in conjunction with the Ansem effects. And yeah, also in creature matchups, also against mono red. Just a great card. Provides a lifelink creature and also yeah, additional ones if you get to flip it, and so on. Just does a lot of things for the deck really. And then as the last 2 1-drops, we have Hunted Witness. This is particularly good in the mirror and against mono red, simply because it trades really well and is a pain to attack into or fight with bird spells. Other options that people have been running in the past are cards like Rustwing Falcon. It's a bit underwhelming, doesn't pressure that well, it's worse against sweepers. It doesn't have lifelink like the backside of Hunted Witness. Then there's Healer's Hawk, which can be nice, but it's much weaker against Chain Whirler than Hunted Witness once again. It mainly seems worth it if you run Pridemate. But if you don't, it's not really worth it. Sorry for the camera covering the Falcon. The Hawk. Didn't plan on going there, but now it turned out. And yeah, and then we have Leonin Vanguard, another card that mostly makes sense with Pridemate, and also basically had to go to make the deck more resilient to green blockers on the ground and Chain Whirler, because this is bad against both. Well, this is only bad against Chain Whirler, but flies over blockers on the ground. Okay, then we have Adanto Vanguard as the 2-drop of choice. The other alternative is Tice Taker, which is basically better against mono blue and mono red, and worse against almost everything else, I think. Adanto Vanguard being pseudo indestructible and attacking for 3 instead of 2 is a really big deal. It attacks into more things like a Jade Light Ranger or a 1/3 Wildgrowth Walker, where Tice Taker can't. It is immune to basically all the sweepers people run, except for like Cry of the Canarium out of sideboards, but that also eats Tice Taker, so there's no difference here. And yeah, I feel like it hits harder. It is much better at like keeping you from being stalled out, especially once you buff this. This is really hard to stop. It has always been one of the most feared cards for me when I face the deck with a lot of decks. Also much better against decks like Drakes, for example, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think all in all, Vanguard is just better than Tice Taker. Tice Taker is just too underpowered, and the utility isn't making up for the raw power and yeah, obnoxiousness of Adanto Vanguard. Like a lot of decks fear Adanto Vanguard the most out of all the cards in the deck, in my experience, like Drakes, for example, and control decks like Asper. Which is why I think, yeah, Adanto is the 2-drop of choice. I tried Tice Taker, and I felt like my matchup against mono red didn't feel significantly worse with Adanto over Tice Taker, so I'm not worried. I think the matchup with might actually matter more than against mono red even, is mono blue, because it makes a lot of their plays which happen during your turn much worse, much more awkward. But the matchup is pretty favorable, and I'm not sure if it's needed. Sure, it definitely makes it better, but I feel like it makes the deck overall worse, even though it makes it better against mono blue, which is one of the top decks. But there are a lot of decks, and I think against most of them I want Vanguard, which is why Vanguard is my go-to. Also, AJ Ellenbogen, who's still playing White Weenie, has started with Taste-Taker, tested Taste-Taker, and went back to Vanguard for the same reasons, basically. Yeah. Then we have for Benalish Marshal, not much explanation needed. It's the white Chain Whirler. For History of Benalia, one of the powerful cards that gives the deck its sort of mid-game gain punch and boost in terms of card advantage, pressure, and also tempo. Card does all the things and is one of the cards that enables the deck. Basically, these 2/3 drops enable the deck, I would say. Then we have 2 Unbreakable Formation that kind of took the place of cards like Conqueror's Pride. This is 1 mana more expensive, but it also kind of does what Loxodon does, so it gives permanent +1/+1 counters. Also gives you a free attack, because both your creatures are not getting tapped and they are indestructible, so you can just kind of shove your board into theirs and then maybe even convoke out a Loxodon or a Tribunal after. Offers a lot of great lines. Also, it gives indestructibility, like I mentioned, so it's a great option to fight sweepers, even in the main deck already. So 2 has been a good number. The card can be a bit situational. You need like probably 3 creatures in play for it to be worth it, and you don't always have 3 mana, and 3 mana can be clunky, so 2 seems like a good number in the main. Then we have 4 Conclave Tribunal. Most people are playing 4. I'm not 100% sure if I like 4, honestly. It could be that I like 3 better. If I would cut the 4s, I would cut it for the 3rd Hunted Witness that I mentioned. But for now, I'm just leaning on the safe side and just like running with the pack, since everyone seems to think you need 4. But yeah, if I would cut one, I might move the 4s to the sideboard over like the 4's Unbreakable Formation or something, but I'm not 100% sure. But all in all, the card is not terrible. Drawing 2 can be awkward, which is why I'm not sold on the 4s. And there are matchups where I don't really need 2 or want to see 1, especially not early on. So 3 might be more correct, but for now, 4 it shall be. Yeah, and then we have for Venerated Loxodon, the other payoff card to go like triple 1-drop into Loxodon and then crack down on your opponent. Card has proven really powerful and makes all these 1-drops good enough to fight and worth it. And then we have 20 planes, because we don't run any shock duels or M10 duels, just a smooth 20 planes. Any land does the same job, and you just need 3 of them and you're good to go. And now we gotta talk about the sideboard. So speaking of Nexus decks, Demystify, 1 mana answer to the enchantments in the Nexus deck. If they drop a Wilderness Reclamation and you just kill it for 1 mana and them not getting to untap, is a really big deal, and I think usually enough to beat them, because you probably like in the games you lose, you're probably like 1 turn too slow. So demystifying their reclamation should buy you enough time, unless they have a second. Then sometimes they can still do it, but even if they don't have even if they have a second, it might not be fast enough. And if they don't have a second, I think there's like not much hope for them to beat you, because they don't have sweepers and they only have 4 fogs, and they need to get to 7 mana to play their Nexus naturally, and that's pretty rough. And against control, we basically go up to 3 or 4 formation. Currently I have 4. Could also be that you only want 3 and maybe you want another Honor Guard or Demystify, or just a Force Tribunal from the main and play another 1-drop. So yeah, these come in against sweepers, basically, against Asper and like gates type stuff. Then we have for Baffling End, our for 2 mana removal for the mirror, mono red, mono blue, Sultai. This comes in against a lot of matchups, basically most non-control, non-combo matchups. Honor Guard comes in against mono red because of Viashino and Chain Whirler, and also is mainly against Sultai because of the Explore package and Chupacabras and or Hostage Takers. And yeah, against mono red, a 1/3 is also a pretty robust body. You even can bring in, can even consider bringing in a couple in the mirror just because they block pretty well and they shut down opposing Loxodons. But they can also shut down yours, so if you have a Loxodon in hand, you might want to play your Loxodon first and then play the Honor Guard. But it's something to keep in mind as an option. And then we have 3 Ajani, another like nice multi-purpose card, another way to grind against control, against sweepers, because both it helps you make the creatures that you have in play more relevant, like you have one creature that is sweeper resilient, like a Witness or a Vanguard, or even a Bodyguard with another creature, and then they can, you have 2 creatures and they basically need to play a sweeper for 1 creature or try and fight you with their clunky spot removal. So you can kind of create a board that doesn't get fully swept and also gets pressured a lot. The ultimate is threatening against control, and in a grindy game the -2 keeps your board full with 2+ threats at all times, which is also really nice. And it also happens to come in really handy against Sultai because it grinds well and makes sure your guys can keep up with their bigger guys, and obviously also in the mirror where there is a lot of fighting and trading happening as well. Yeah, that's basically the sideboard. The Demystify kind of solve the Nexus issue, beating them by killing their key enchantments to get that critical turn, extra turn to attack that you need before they get to combo. And against control we basically have a bunch of Unbreakable Formations and Ajanis against their sweeper and spot removal to grind them. And then I think we can be fine without any splash, and so far it has been working well for me and I've been pretty happy without any splash. So yeah, I can only recommend trying it. The smoothness and simplicity of this list is really, really nice and makes it operate very well and reliable. I really didn't enjoy the hiccups of the splash for what the splash offered to me. If you feel like you need extra support against Nexus, I can totally see cutting 1 formation for Force Demystify, for example. It could also be interesting to consider bringing in like 1 Demystify or so in the mirror, because there are the Baffling Ends, there are the Histories, and maybe even some Tribunals if they have them. So you could get some solid value out of them, although I'm not sure if it's worth it to like kill a History after stage 1, and like killing a Baffling End doesn't do that much because, you know, it's not giving you back the creature. So if they Baffling Ended your Marshal, you're just getting back a 3/3, not your Marshal. But you can get some nice surprise stuff in combat and stuff. But yeah, all in all, I don't think it is worth it probably. But I thought about it and I've seen people play it against me, but it's probably just too situational. And your other cards are probably just better. So in the end, I don't think you should do it. Or at least not more than 1. And even then, if your opponent isn't drawing an enchantment, you're having a dead card, which can be much more hurtful than it helps to demystify something. But figured it's worth discussing. Alright, as usual, gonna hop into some matches, 3 matches to be exact, to show it in action. Currently in Mythic, I think top 400 or something, climbing up. Started at like top 1000 when I hit Mythic. Already making some headway up, bouncing a bit back and forth. But yeah, there's plenty of more to climb. Okay, Hope you guys enjoyed the deck tech series. If you did, hit the like button, and see you in a moment with match number 1. Stay tuned.